I've spent the last 10 years pushing the limits while identifying trends and patterns in my type 1 diabetes management. Follow along as I learn, apply, and share the fitness, nutrition, and lifestyle strategies that I've learned from diabetes experts around the world. The real question is, how can we live fearlessly with diabetes while maintaining stable blood sugars? This podcast is here to give you the answer. My name is Matt Vandevecht, head coach and co-founder of FTF Warrior, and welcome to Pardon My Pancreas.
All right, welcome back to the Pardon My Pancreas podcast. I'm pumped for a guest today who brings a unique perspective that I have not lived with yet, and that is living as a parent of someone living with type 1 diabetes. Obviously, I've got type 1. I have a daughter, but I've never had a child with diabetes, and I do pray that never happens. But there's a lot of people out there that do experience that reality. And today we've got Maureen Petersen on, who is also an MD. Now, Maureen Petersen, you're an award-winning leader, life coach, author, physician. I did see that you're a general pediatrician, which I'm sure came in handy with their diagnosis of your own child. But you're an allergist, immunologist. You spent a lot of time caring with patients that have a variety of acute and chronic health problems. And I noticed as well here, military veteran. I'm sure we'll have an interesting sidebar there, but accomplished life coach, and you help parents specifically of chronically ill children. I thought that was fantastic as they regain control of their lives and thrive. And of course, you're a mother of 3. One of them has type 1. So we have lots of topics to get into. I'm excited for this. Thank you so much, Maureen, for coming on today.
No, I am super excited to be here and so grateful to be on your podcast today, Matt. So I'm ready for a fantastic conversation.
Love it. Well, I'm going to jump into what is likely going to be the most popular topic, which is type 1 everything. So you have a child that has type 1. Is that recent? Is that you guys are used to it and just rolling with it now? What's that like?
So not recent. And the story behind it is a little unique because, and I'll go back to like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a mom and to be a doctor. Like those were my 2 goals. And I was fortunate to accomplish both of those goals. When I was in my residency in pediatrics, my daughter was an infant at the time, and she was diagnosed with pediatric neuroblastoma, which is a type of cancer. My world crashed. I became consumed with worry and fear, just wondering how she was going to tolerate surgeries and chemo and all the stuff that goes along with it. I kind of went into a very dark place, but with time and with some knowledge about mental health, kind of got out of that dark place and still worried about her, but thought we were on a good path. And then fast forward 12 years later, she was drinking a lot and peeing a lot. And I said to her, what's going on with you? Like, does it hurt when you pee? Are you peeing just a little bit? Because in my mind, I was like, we've already checked the box of having an ill child, that I've already done that. Like this can't be diabetes. So she's like, no, it doesn't hurt. I'm peeing normal. So the next day, she was going to a school for the arts for ballet at the time. And she texted me from school and said, Mom, there's something wrong with me. I peed 12 times today. You need to bring home whatever you need to bring home to fix me.
Wow.
So I went in the peds clinic and got a urine cup and a urine dipstick and trotted over to her school, determined to like fix her urinary tract infection because of course she can't have diabetes. In the school bathroom, she pees in a cup and calls me in, and I dip it and see the amount of glucose in her urine. And I immediately knew what that was. And, it's funny, during the intro, you had said like, oh, you are a doctor and a general pediatrician. And like, so you kind of knew how things went. Well, I tell you, Matt, in that moment, it made things so much worse
Mm,
because I knew exactly what it meant to have type 1 diabetes because I had taken care of patients with it. And
uh,
so in that moment, I'm crying and she looks at me and is like, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "You have diabetes." And then she starts crying and she doesn't even know why.
yeah.
And she says to me, "Am I going to die?" And I was
Mm,
like, "No, sweetheart, you're not going to die." And so she says, "Well, why are you crying?" And I was like, "Because I don't want you to have diabetes." And that was the whole start of this parenting of a type 1 diabetic kind of journey. My world crashed again. It has now been, she just celebrated her 11th diaversary.
uh,
And she's doing awesome. I figured out how to really manage my fear and guilt and all the emotions that come with watching your child have an illness that doesn't have a cure and is going to
mhm.
impact them every single day. So I found coaching in my journey and became a certified life coach. Realized quickly that it was helping my patients in clinic when I was able to use tools that I've learned in coaching, and have now like really been passionate and dedicating myself to helping parents who have chronically ill kids, specifically type 1 diabetes.
Gotcha. Wow. So she's probably 23.
23,
Okay,
23. Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
So to circle back, because I was like, I can't
yeah.
interrupt this story. It's very touching, and I love it. But it's just a little tangent. You had mentioned she got, I think it was neoblastoma when she was younger, and then you said 12 years
Neuroblastoma. Yeah, yeah.
neuroblastoma. Said okay, and 12 years later she was drinking a lot. And my
Oh,
first thought was alcohol, and I'm like, I'm not gonna judge her. Don't judge her. Oh, water.
water. Yes, water. Let's make that clear in case she's
Oh my
listening. Yes, it
goodness.
was water.
Yep. No, I had the same thing. I was drinking gallons and gallons a day.
Yeah,
It's wild how the body
yeah,
tries to balance itself out. It just you cannot consume enough to flush
yeah.
out the glucose. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because um, the weekend before she got diagnosed, she was away at a retreat. And when she got diagnosed, and we put all the pieces together and started explaining to her like what was going on with her body, she's like, "Oh, well, Mom, I have to tell you something. When I was at the retreat, there was a sink in my room, and I was so thirsty all night. I sat on the sink just gulping water because I
Mm,
couldn't get enough water in me." And so you are absolutely correct. The amount of thirst that your body creates from having a high blood sugar
mhm.
is phenomenal.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy to hear she's doing better now and just rolling with it. It's been a long time, so of course you start to gain acceptance and strategies and all that. I'd love to hear more about your side of the story. I mean, the initial diagnosis, I can only imagine, was one of the most difficult things you've probably ever
Yeah.
experienced. I mean, my sister was diagnosed after I was with type 1. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the heaviest moments. And I didn't have a child yet.
Mm,
And now that I have a child,
yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, different story. So tell me a little bit about what that was like for you and the journey of acceptance, of learning about these things, real life application, of course, outside of your
Yeah.
practice. What was that
Yeah.
like for you?
Well, I tell you, the I'm going to tell you a quick story of what happened right after this diagnosis in the school bathroom. we get into the car and head to the hospital. And I knew she was going to have to be admitted. And so in that car ride, she says to me, Mom, I'm going to tell you two things that I want to happen. And I said, okay, well, what's that? And she said, I want them to tell you everything that's going on with me and you tell me. And I'm like, okay, well, sweetheart, they're not going to tell you anything besides you have diabetes. Like, you've already heard this. So unless your mom's a moron, like, and I'm not, that there's no surprises that are going to come. And so I said, what's the second thing? And she said, I don't want anyone rushing around. And I said, well, why? And she replied, well, on TV, anytime I see a patient in a hospital and people are rushing, that patient on TV dies. So if somebody rushes, that means I'm going to die. And so I tell you that story because I had taken care of tons of kids by that point in time in the pediatric world. And that moment gave me such perspective on that you never really know what's going on in someone's head. And even kids have their own kind of thoughts and beliefs and worries and fears. And so that moment really stuck with me because it made me realize that as a parent, that I need to be good about conversations and communication and asking about, being open and wondering if thoughts or feelings are going on with her. So that was unique. I will also say that as a parent, having perspective as they go through different developmental stages with diabetes. And, you can relate to this too. Like initially there's shock when you have the diagnosis, and then there's like this resistance that you don't want the diagnosis and try to think, well, it's not there. If I just ignore it, I'm going to pretend it's gone and it's going to go away. And then, it's like grieving. And that finally you get to this acceptance point in time. And so realizing that as a parent is also super important, because in the background, they're also going through these developmental stages as a kid, that you are, a regular 12-year-old kid who doesn't have diabetes, who's going to go through puberty and high school and all that kind of stuff. And then you throw on diabetes on top of it. It can get a little messy sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, and you hit the nail on the head with, the 5 stages of acceptance, the grieving and all
Yeah.
that. Certainly what I went through. And day 1, I was like, I can do this. And then day 2 was like, forget this. I don't care. I don't want it. It's not real. And it fell into that for a while before I turned around and was like, okay, I need to take care of this. So I can only imagine there's probably a similar, maybe not identical, but similar process that a parent might go through, where being outside of the diagnosis enough to kind of see big picture, but you're still connected, that maybe there are some stages or phases that you went through that you can notice now.
Definitely. And I would say it was a little different for me, I think, because I, as a physician, knew what the kind of everyday business would be with diabetes. Yeah. So there was less of this kind of learning. I still needed to do some learning, because certainly being in it is a little bit different than taking care of a patient with it when you're living with it 24/7. But So a little bit different for me, but still, I would say, there's always throughout all of these kind of stages on any time we have change and transition in our lives. This one, there's this fear that can become quite overwhelming at times. And this, it's the first time she went to a sleepover, on worrying and being fearful, like, oh my God, like, what if something happens? What if she doesn't have stuff to treat a low? Like, all the thoughts of what ifs like go through your head. And then, she gets her driver's license, and then you get concerned, oh my God, like, what if she's high and she thinks she's okay to drive when she's high and gets in the car accident? Like, all the catastrophic scenarios like play in a parent's mind. So fear can have this like layer on top of all of these stages. And it's really important. I mean, I'll use myself as an example. You can get caught up so much in fear that you forget to like let them be their own person. And you as a parent be your own person.
Right.
I gave up on doing any hobbies for myself, or like reading books, or any enjoyment out of life. Like, it was sucked out of me because I was so scared all the time. And so it's the realization that that fear's going to be there, but it doesn't need to be driving the car on this journey through life. Like, stick it in the trunk and let it come along for the ride. But
Right.
you don't need to let it be in the driver's seat. And so figuring out that part was really important in my journey as a parent.
Well, and I love that analogy you gave. It doesn't have to be removed, the fear. You stick it in the trunk and keep driving.
Yeah.
Where,
Yes.
I heard somebody else say it a little differently, which was living fearlessly isn't the absence of fear, it's being bold in the presence of fear.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like,
Absolutely.
oh,
Yeah.
that is very different. It's like, yeah, we all still experience fear. Fear is actually a good thing. It's our brain trying
Yes.
to keep us alive and be aware of things, but it can certainly get in the way of enjoying life sometimes.
Right.
It gets a little bit too big. And so you got
Yeah.
to cram it in the trunk.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious too, and maybe it's some role play would be helpful to jump into this example. If I were a parent of a recently diagnosed child with type 1, let's say it was in the last year or two, and it's recent enough where I've learned the basics, but I'm still in that fear place where I don't know everything. There's the uncertainties of, well, why did we spike though, right? The blood sugar roller
Yes.
coaster. I know that life coaching probably has helped you in your relationship with these clients that you take on. How would that impact what you would give as a recommendation or as guidance to that parent?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And some of what I teach is that it needs to begin with really being conscious and aware of how you're thinking. And what I mean by that is, and you said this before, like, we have very intelligent brains, all of us. Our brains are there to protect us. So sometimes it's giving us thoughts that are meant to protect us.
Right.
But our brains really want us to stay in the status quo. They don't want us to change. It doesn't want us to change because change could mean something good, but in your brain's mind, it means there's the fear of the unknown that's there. So it wants to keep you in the status quo. It gives you tons and tons and tons of thoughts throughout the day. thoughts that you're not even conscious of sometimes. And those thoughts are what generates your feelings. And so fear is coming from things that you're thinking about. It's not fear that a blood sugar is high. Like a blood sugar being high, for example, could be a great thing to somebody else and could spike some excitement in
Love this.
somebody.
Yeah.
But it's really a thought about a high blood sugar that is caught driving somebody's fear.
Mm-hmm.
So the first step in all of it is really being able to pause and become conscious of your thoughts to figure out what's driving that emotion. And that's pretty important because emotions are what drive us to act in life. So fear keeps us stuck. And like in the example that I said about the high blood sugar, let's say the high blood sugar is happening right when my daughter was going to a sleepover. And in my mind, it's like, oh my God, she's high, she's going to get corrected, she's going to go low. What if she doesn't have this? It's going to be a mess. And all of those what ifs drive the fear. And I then say, that's it. You're not going to the sleepover. We can't have it. And it's not the high blood sugar that's making it so that I'm saying that. It's my thoughts that are leading to my feelings that are causing me to act. Mm-hmm. And so being conscious of how you're thinking about a child's blood sugars or diagnosis is really important first step in getting control of the emotions we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, the labels we assign the numbers, right? Where it's like, is it good, is it bad? It's just a number.
Right. Which, it's just a number.
To be fair, is easier said than done. You know, we see the number.
I know.
I mean, I got like frustrated.
Yes.
But this actually, as you're talking, reminded me of a good example of this. So I just completed another triathlon. So I do triathlons, and I've been connected to a group of other type 1s that also do triathlons as a result. We kind of talk and, share strategies. Where do you hide your sugar on your bike? But what's interesting is that my goal is always to stay in range as often as possible. So this last triathlon, I was in range 99%. I was so close, a little bit frustrated. I couldn't get 100, but still happy with it. My friends, they aim for higher blood sugars to have that peace of mind so they don't have to think about blood sugars during the race. Yes. So when I see the 184 that pulled me out of range, I was like, gosh, dang it, I didn't get it, right? They would see that and go, thank God I'm high. I'm not going to go low, right? And it's excitement for them. So exact same number, but very different responses. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's the labeling that we assign with those numbers. It's a very powerful way to approach diabetes. I love that you brought that up. Is that something that, go ahead.
It's so being aware of it is the first important step, which is hard to do sometimes because our brain is firing off thoughts constantly. I mean, the just us talking, like there are thoughts that are running through our brains. Your listeners have thoughts running through their brain about this podcast episode, and they're not even aware of it. And so having that ability to pause and reflect is the first step to it. And then it's to really get curious about it. Like, okay, so you noticed that your blood sugar was 185 and you felt frustrated. Did that thought of, hey, that 185 was out of range, like, did it help you or hurt you? Do you want to keep it or not want to keep it? And so just getting curious about it without judging ourselves is the next big step, which takes a lot of practice because we are really, really good with judging ourselves. Everybody is, not just T1Ds, not just parents of T1Ds. Every human judges themselves about something. I'm not good enough for this, or this, I'm ugly, or I weigh too much, or I weigh too little, or all of these judgment things, because we're trying to fit some mold that our brain thinks will keep us safe.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love that thought. Did this help or did this hurt? Like the outcome oriented thought process, right? And I think a lot of people, well, I'll even give an example for myself because this is something I still find myself thinking of when I am aware. The low anxiety. So low blood sugars, no one likes them, right? But some people are more likely to experience anxiety surrounding lows. And I've pondered to myself, same question, is that helpful? Like, should I just buck up and deal with it? Or is this a good thought? I'm like, well, it has saved me from going low a lot of times, but I know with it for a fact, I do overreact sometimes. Like I get nervous when I'm still totally safe. And it's like, okay, is this good or bad? Is it helpful or hurt? So I think that's a powerful question to ask. And I love that it's actionable. That's something people can actually ask themselves today. Was that anger for the 200 helpful? No. Right. So,
and people now like talk a lot about mindfulness, and they throw that term around, and folks kind of, oh, it's like yoga, and but mindfulness is all it's doing is kind of pausing yourself so that you're able to take a good look at the thoughts that are going on in your head. And like what you're saying, when you're like going low but you're not low yet and you're like getting super anxious, it's doing something, whether it be like deep breathing or focusing on rubbing your fingers together for just a few minutes, like focusing your attention so that you can quiet your mind for a minute and figure out what thought is driving that like anxious feeling. But it takes practice because we're not used to interrupting our brain.
Well, and on that topic, what have you found that is useful for interrupting or even just generating more awareness of these thoughts? How do you break that pattern and identify?
That another really good question, and I have a really simple answer, which is journaling. And I like when I say that, people are like, there's no way journaling will help me. And I'm like, you know what? Just give it a try. Like, it's not going to help you in the moment. Like you and your example, you're running around, you're getting a low blood sugar, you're feeling anxious. You're not going to whip out a journal and start journaling your thoughts, right? But what it starts as setting aside a few minutes every day with a blank sheet of paper and just free flowing on what thoughts are coming in your head. And it will start as silly things like, I can't believe I'm journaling. This paper's really blank right now. But as you practice it and you allow your brain to relax, that you will become more aware of those thoughts that are going around in your head, so that in the moment, you get better at pausing them to say, okay, that's not serving me. I'm going to grab another thought and move on. So journaling for sure is a great tool to use to help practice that.
Love that. And a phrase that I came across years ago that I understand at the core, but is still difficult to really grasp is I am not my thoughts, right? Where it's like what you mentioned in passing just there, your thoughts pass by. And I'm like, That
Yes.
reminds me of that quote. It's tough to remember that when you do
Hmm.
think things, but yeah, you don't have to act on every thought or emotion. You get to choose what
Right.
happens. But
Yes.
I agree. I think journaling is a great way to make that into more of a practice that's second nature and not such a
Yeah.
difficult thing to do
Right.
when identifying
Yeah.
it.
Right. Because, changing a thought will never happen unless you're aware of it and you choose to change that thought. Like you can't change something that you're not even aware of is existing. So you have to start with awareness at first.
Right. Awareness, then curiosity, take action. Um, I'll give you one of my favorite, well, I call it an action item, I guess, but kind of an exercise for identifying the silver lining or, shifting your perspective is I'll ask myself, how is this for my benefit? And it could
Oh,
be the most
that's so
difficult
good.
thing. I crashed my car. Oh, this sucks. But
Yes.
how is this for my benefit? And I'll laugh sometimes. 'Cause I'm like, there's no
Yeah.
way I'm going to find a way to answer this. Oh, there's an answer. I'll
Yes.
find something that is actually beneficial. That for me has been a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah. Similarly, I'll use the question of what does this teach me? And
Mm,
it's very similar to what
that's
you just
great.
said, crash your car. What is this teaching me right now? It's
Yeah.
teaching me I shouldn't speed around a corner or, whatever it is. But there's so many times that we miss out on really figuring out like lessons in life. I mean, especially with folks who have type 1 diabetes, because there's already this medical obstacle that
Hmm.
you always have to think about. And so life seems sometimes a little more challenging because of it. But asking, like, what is this teaching me, will really help with shifting perspective. And, so I'll give you a quick example too. My daughter really wanted, when she was in college, to go to medical school. And she said she was trying to figure out a way to pay for medical school. She said, well, that's easy, Mom. I'll join the military like you, and they'll pay for medical school. And I was like, ooh, sweetheart, like that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I
And she's
tried
like,
that too.
well, well, why? And I said, well, you have diabetes.
Yep.
And she's like, no, it's okay. I'll get an islet cell transplant and it'll cure my diabetes and then I'll join the military. I'm like, okay, now you've got a couple of problems because you can't really get an islet cell transplant right now. And the military still won't take you because of the transplant. So try
Yeah.
again. Well, so she was on this like mission to try to figure it out,
Yeah.
because again it was goes back to our question of like, okay, this obstacle, like what is it teaching me? So she would not let it up and was like, I'm going to figure out a way to finance medical school. And so figured out that MD PhD programs actually pay students to go to medical school. So your tuition's free, you get a stipend.
Wow.
Takes much longer
Mm.
to be an MD, PhD uh, graduate, but you graduate with 2 degrees, you get a lot of research. And so when she came to me, tells me, okay, I'm doing this. I didn't believe her that it was free at first. And the figured out, yes, she was right. And she figured this out. And she is now an MD PhD student and is studying lupus because she
Mm.
wants to like figure out the cause of autoimmunity. And so it that's an example of like a challenge that diabetes like gave her, that then instead of just crumbling in a corner and being like, I give up, that it was really asking, what can I learn from this? Like, there must be another way, and figuring it out. And she figured it out to where it is an even better option than the first option that she even considered.
I love that. Well, and I think this leads into a topic that a lot of parents want for their kids, but struggle in the how to, which is how do you empower your kids to shift perspective like that, where it becomes an opportunity to get stronger, more resilient, or find
Yes.
other paths in life. Do you teach that? Did you just get lucky? Is there something within the life coaching or mindset world that you believe has
Yeah.
helped?
So I would say parents teach a lot about resiliency through their example. And so I am sure your kids are learning a lot about resiliency just watching you and going and doing a triathlon and not letting diabetes stop you. That example of being able to manage your mind and manage your emotions and figure things out and change perspective is taught to a kid a lot by example. And I knew that from practicing pediatrics on how important having a resilient parent was in having a kid grow up. And so when things happened with my daughter and with diabetes, and my world kind of came crashing down again after we had already gone through this years earlier with the whole cancer thing, that I did not want to go back into that place of where I was before. And so it was really the recognition that something needed to change and doing something about it. And your kids are watching you take those steps.
That's huge. I would say that's the biggest lesson I've learned as a parent is that everything that I do is being watched and modeled. So I have
Whether
to
you
improve
like it
myself.
or not. Yes.
I know. Like, shoot, this is the best self-help course I could have ever enrolled in because I have to be the
Yes.
better person if I want her
Yes.
to be successful. Oh, yeah. Forces you to really take care of it. So
It does,
it's a
but
beautiful thing.
this is the other thing too, is that nobody is perfect at anything they do. I know, even as me, a pediatrician who had, this kiddo who went through cancer treatment successfully and is doing great as a diabetic, like I was not a perfect parent. But it's not judging yourself for mistakes along the way. It's recognizing them, giving yourself a little bit of grace, and learning from it.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody's perfect. And understanding we're all just doing the best we can is pretty important.
Yeah, love that. So if there were, and there is no generalized perfect answer for everyone, I realize that, but if there were a framework that you've noticed works for many of your clients, what would you say is an important strategy or mindset shift that you've noticed benefit a lot of your clients?
And so we had talked about, the mindset shift about, what is this teaching me? And I think that is very helpful. The doing along with journaling, doing a practice of gratitude is also very, very helpful, and can be something that is incorporated into the family so that the kids grow up focusing on gratitude. And so I'll tell you, Matt, as a scientist, it's super funny because there's so much data on how beneficial it is to write down 3 specific things every day that you are grateful for. So, and what I mean by that is I can't write down, I'm grateful for my kids. Yes, I'm grateful for my kids, but it needs to be specific. Like, I am grateful for the phone call that I had with my daughter today. So very specific, something in that day. 3 things, write it down. By doing that, it causes your focus to be on the good things in the day. And it's similar to cars. When you're driving on the road and you get home and I say to you, hey, Matt, how many Honda Pilots did you see? You're like, I don't know. I have no idea. But if you are in the business of getting ready to buy a Honda Pilot, I promise you, when you drive and you get home and I say, Matt, how many Honda Pilots did you see? You're gonna say, I saw 10 Honda Pilots on the road today, because the filter you had set up in your brain was, I'm only going to see Honda Pilots. I don't know what other cars I'm gonna see, but my brain's gonna see them. They're just not gonna tell me they're important. The same thing happens when it comes to gratitude. When you write down 3 specific things every day, it shifts your brain to only looking for good things and having that be your filter. So we got really good at dinner time on discussing the 3 things of the day that we were grateful for. And just doing that is a framework that can help with building resiliency in the family.
I love that. The good old reticular activating system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So 5 red cars, 2 blue, and 3 yellow. Like, why did I notice all of those? Oh yeah,
yes.
I'm gonna buy one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
exactly.
huge. I love
huge.
that.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well,
so why we all don't take the time to really make writing down 3 things a priority is really super interesting. I mean, it's easier not to do something, but wouldn't it make life so much easier, really, if we just focused a few minutes every day on doing that?
yeah, and more enjoyable when you can
More
find
enjoyable.
more things to be grateful
Right.
for. Yeah,
Right.
I love that. Well, I think that's a perfect way to tie up the mindset lesson. I mean, obviously, a big part of it, as you mentioned, what is this teaching me? I think that's actionable not just for mine, but also for blood sugars. Oh, I'm 300 right now. What is this teaching me? Oh, I should probably count my carbs.
Right.
There's a lesson in everything. But before we wrapped up, I wanted to give you an opportunity, just in case there's anything that I missed, but were there any golden nuggets that you're hoping to share with the audience today that you think would be helpful to add in?
I think you did an awesome job with asking questions, and I think it's really good sometimes to maintain, as a parent, perspective and understanding that your kid is going through life with a challenge, but it's not a challenge that has to stop them. And the perspective that, it's hard sometimes, and having that clear, open communication with your kids about thoughts and feelings is another really important thing that I think parents should do when their kid has health challenges. Being an example, like we spoke about, is very powerful. There's lots of work that I do with folks with regards to thoughts and emotion work, and really understanding how those play together and how we have control over them. That when we control them, we have the ability to create a life that we want, even though there's challenges in it, because there's no life that is filled with unicorns and roses, that there's always ups and downs. In my daughter's world, and cancer and diabetes have given us ups and downs. We've done a lot of learning through those challenges. And I can tell you there is light at the end of the tunnel. That looking back at my life, I would not wish either of those diagnoses on my worst enemy, but I'm also super grateful for them, because I know I wouldn't be here today talking to you if those things didn't happen. And I wouldn't be able to help the people I do if I didn't walk in that path. Mm-hmm. So I'm grateful for it. I think folks who've been challenged have a choice of whether they're going to learn and grow from it, or they're going to stay stuck. And I always choose learn and grow.
Love that. All right, so I've got one more question for you, but before we do, I want to give everybody a chance to learn more about you. So I know you've got your own practice, and you do help parents of type 1s. Where can people find more info about you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Maureen Michele MD. Michele has one L. My website is maureenmichelemd.com. I also have written a book about reclaiming life. That's the title of the book. It's available on Amazon, and it has stories about my daughter, stories about patients I've taken care of, and gives more practical lessons that parents can walk away and start applying today.
Love that. Well, that's great. A couple different options then for people to find you and poke around, learn some more, see the stories. I think that's fantastic.
For sure.
All right, so last question I want to end with is, if you had the opportunity to time travel back to diagnosis day, what would you coach yourself on in that scenario?
I would say, if I could time travel back, that I would tell myself to stay in the present, focus on my daughter, and understand it's going to be okay. That is the thought that can serve me better than having my brain go to all of these kind of catastrophic thoughts that I was having in that moment. But it's going to be okay, I think, is a great thought that I wish I had in that moment.
Yeah, I kind of anticipated that was going to be part of the answer. It's going to be okay. I think that's
going to be okay.
That's powerful. It's a reminder for all of us too. And if there's somebody in that moment right now watching this video, it's going to be okay. You don't know my situation. It's going to be okay.
Yes.
Right? Beautiful.
Yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoyed this interview. Lots of takeaways, and I really appreciate your time today, Maureen, just coming on and sharing the golden nuggets. So thank you so much for giving us your stories and your insight. It's been fantastic.
No, Matt, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on and for doing this podcast. I think your dedication to making this world a better place for T1Ds is quite honorable. So thank you for the work you do.
My pleasure. It's a lot of fun and rewarding, to say the least. And everybody who's watching, thank you for hanging out with us today. Be sure to go check out Maureen's pages, her book. I'm sure it's fantastic. Even if this episode serves only a glimpse into what it is, I'm sure that she's got a lot to offer. So thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. Be sure to check out the last episode and keep up the fight.